there was a change, we were expecting it to select some of it, but there's not.
He updated me yesterday what you guys talked about last week.
So then we'll just, can you keep going until they have something for us?
Well, there's two.
There's two parcels in it, but it basically squares up all 15 streets.
Well, you don't remember that.
No, we need Don.
Okay, so that's good. So, okay.
Oh, yeah, we didn't discuss it last week.
You should get there with it, probably.
It should develop quickly.
It's not, this is pretty.
You have to get about the case. That's what it sounds like. I verified it front. They are up to date on
Somebody told me.
Well, I told Brian that that was there.
What you do, carry your tie in? You walk in without your tie. No, you walk in without your tie.
Snap on. Snap on. Snap on.
It's like a mission's office, a couple of them hang on the back of the door.
Is it the zip tie?
No, not a tie. Tied up real quick. I tie sweet ties over here.
Yeah.
It's not taking very long anymore.
Well, no, I just wondered if you just leave it here in your office or if that's like, okay.
My daughter goes to do it there. She needs to be flat money for her. She had it around the neck, and you got it in me.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't tie it on you, I tie it on me and hand it to you.
Yep.
It's like using a bow line without having a rope around it.
Yeah, exactly.
You got that right way.
It's like, oh, hang on a second. Does the round come out of the hole? Does the round tree, or what are we doing? Is that under sale? Only if you want.
If you want.
Do whatever you like. Hey, whenever you're ready. Oh. Okay. Oh, yeah. Quick question, but. All right. Welcome this morning to our Board of County Commissioners meeting. It's good to have you here. And as always, we're looking for participation in a prayer, reading, or thought, and the Pledge of Allegiance. And we're looking for volunteers who would like to volunteer to do that. Are there any volunteers that would like to do that? Andrew? Andrew? Got the prayer? Prayer is usually the hardest one to get. I don't know why. It should be the easiest, but it's the hardest. Is there anybody that would like to lead us in a pledge? All right, thank you. Come on up. Yes. Thanks. Andrew Jackson. And Bryce. Yes.
Dear Heavenly Father, we're thankful for our many blessings. We're thankful for the freedoms which we have and the opportunities which we have in this great country. We're thankful for those who protect us at home and abroad and secure our freedoms. We're thankful for our county commission and others who serve to bring us liberty and justice. We pray for the welfare of our county, our state, and our country. And again, we're thankful for our many blessings, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, as a reminder, we're gonna build our consent agenda and our regular agenda. If there are any items on the agenda that you'd like to speak to, if you just come up and state your name as we get to those items, you're more than welcome to do so. And then we'll have public comment for just general or other than our agenda items at the very end. So with that, we have 19 items on our consent agenda. And I don't see Court here. On number 3, there was a bunch of comments that kind of went back and forth. You know, Dave, if those have been, oh, there's Court, okay. If those have been resolved or not, I don't mind leaving it on consent as long as everything was to your
Yes, they have,
satisfaction.
they have been resolved, and I'm gonna learn how to use that system so I don't send
Yeah, I
the
saw
same
like
message.
10 messages of the same thing. So they are, so, okay,
It's fine.
okay. I'm fine leaving that on consent. Yep. Then if we can hold number 13. That's all I have on consent. Do we need to hold any others?
17?
17, okay. Okay, now moving to our regular agenda. We'll place everything temporarily on consent unless we pull it off for discussion. Number 5, it's been requested that we table number 5, possibly till after our closed meetings. And the reason why, I know there's been lots of discussion, and Paul's been at various meetings, even late into yesterday. And so there's some information they needs to give to us before we actually make a decision on that. So if that's all right.
Mr. Chair, and number 4.
Table number 4.
No,
Oh.
if we could just hold number 4 for discussion.
Okay, hold number 4, okay. Are you all right with tabling number 5?
Yep.
Okay, on consent to table. Okay. Are there any others?
I had questions on 8.
8, okay. Okay. And then we'll come back to our closed meetings. Are there any comments to the ones that we put on the consent agenda to either approve, ratify, or as stated on the documents? Okay, seeing none, then we will move to number 13. And this is one that Dave and I have kind of talked about back and forth. I know it has on here, the state has on these requests for exemptions on personal property, says that anything that is less than $10,300. And so the question is do we need to have these on our agenda if they are below that statutorily? If we're gonna be, I mean, if we did not approve them, then we'd be violating state law. So that's kind of the bigger question is, do we, and if we do, then why?
If they meet the requirements, then you would not have the right to deny that request if they meet those statutory requirements. We're trying to determine still that list, whether it includes all applications, because the taxpayer has to apply for the exemption. It's not an automatic thing. They have to submit their information along with the application. And so if that occurs after there's been an assessment of the tax, then it would need to be abated to pull it back off. So we're still looking into that as far as what actually needs to come to the agenda and what does not.
Okay,
But there's no downside to approving the item today, but we're trying to figure out the details to clean that up.
okay. So it'd be appropriate for us to go ahead and approve,
Yes.
and then we'll just kind of work on the details for the future.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? I'm fine with that
Right, I think that works for me. I'll move that we approve consent agenda item number 13 as stated.
Second. I got a motion and a second to approve agenda item number 13. All in favor?
Aye.
That passes 3-0. Okay. Now number 17. This is one that we continued so that we could have the documentation out there and everyone could see it beforehand. That's been out there at least a week now. Or some questions, I think.
Yes, so the question actually comes from a member of the public who emailed me on this. They had a request that I would like, and I don't believe they were able to attend today. Oh, never mind, they're here. Maybe you want to come up and speak about it then. So.
Chris Bowerbank from Lehigh. First of all, thank you for the open dialogue as it relates to that Senate Bill 15 and the APA process. Also for continuing this for a week to allow us to review the attachments. In section 26.3-9 B part 2, it appears that it could be misconstrued that the 120 days needs to occur at the end of the calendar year from when it's initially reviewed or from when that review process has started.
Rather than the renewal date?
Rather than in the 20th calendar year from when it was originally approved. So just requesting that text be made consistent with Part A, saying it by the end of the 20th calendar year from when it was originally approved. And then one other item, that should a full review be initiated if the original approval included any sort of variance, whether it's acreage, maybe a setback, maybe a road access, et cetera. And is that variance still valid? Is that variance still needed? So should that be a trigger for a full APA review? And then one item that we'd like clarification on is in Part B, does that allow for a review of the APA should there be non-compliance with best practices of either that mining or agricultural operation? For example, if it does get approved and in, say, year 2, the surrounding community feels that there's non-compliance with best practices, can the commission initiate a re-review of that APA in order to encourage dialogue and compliance, or is the surrounding community, do we need to wait 20 years before that's looked at again? Just wondering, I believe that in reading Part B, that it does allow the commission to reinitiate a review, where
don't
it
think so.
says,
I don't think so, but
because, for surrounding communities, if it's approved, how do we encourage dialogue? How do we, in austere cases, how do we force dialogue between the landowner and the county and the surrounding community if the surrounding community observes that best practices are not being adhered to?
yeah.
So we'd like the addition of another trigger, for example, to initiate a review if that situation occurs.
Okay, we'll have Mr. Moore
Or speak to that.
speak
Thank
to
you,
that.
Chris.
Thank you, though. Thank you.
Robert Moore, County Attorney's Office again. Just let me respond to those. And again, this is your ordinance, so you can decide how you want this to look and results thereof. As to the first issue that was raised about the 120 days under 26-3-9 sub B2, I believe that language is from the statute. And so with that language, it would be my recommendation that you not change that language.
Well, so the question is, so for example, we just approved a couple weeks ago the Mink Farm Agricultural Protection Area.
And that's a different issue, I think, than the 120 days.
No. In 20 years from now, that would technically have been expired. So what I understand Chris to be saying here is
he's saying it would have expired. 120 days before the end of the calendar year would have been 3 or 4 months after the expiration date on that. So the way I understand what he's asking, which seems reasonable to me, is it's 120 days before the expiration of the ag
so it-
protection area.
Yeah, and I think that's what's, again, the
And the end
language.
of a calendar year has a
It's-
definite time.
Correct, it's ending the 20th calendar year, so they have to do it on the last year, because it's good for the full 20 calendar years. So they have to do it on the last year, on the 20th year, that's when the review process is taking place. And so within,
I think we could
so you
add
have
some
to- you-
language to that to clarify for the public,
Ma-
because I
yeah,
think,
Maybe define calendar year, because
Yes.
if I'm reading calendar year, I'm saying, well,
January
it
1.
was March 3rd is when its 20th anniversary is, but they would have till December 31st, which would be the end of the calendar year,
Yes.
to actually do the renewal.
So
I
what-
think that maybe
Yes.
is the part
what that
needs
basically
clarified.
means is that by August, well, whatever the 120th day is, by August 1st, you have to have a public hearing to discuss whether it's, that ag protection area should be continued, modified, or terminated.
and by
In
August
the
1st.
in the 20th year.
But see,
Calendar year.
again, that just took it beyond 20 years. August 1st, for example, for the mink farm would be 20 years plus.
It's in the 20th calendar year, that's what the statute says.
Okay. Anyway,
Oh.
I still think, I mean, I know this might be in the language, but this is
I think
our,
we can
our
clarify it.
ordinance. I think it'd be nice to clarify what that
Okay.
means in the 20th year or whatever.
Okay.
Because it seems to, then there won't be misinterpretation.
I can see where that would be confusing or misinterpreted, so,
And I'll double check the statute, but my recollection was that was straight from the statute.
okay.
So,
And so the
We
clarification.
never
would
get
be
statutes from the
after
state
the-
that are not vague.
I know.
You kidding me? The last one we had, that wording was,
Okay,
That's
so the
So-
next
So
issue,
could we put that as like the 120 days before the date of the original approval?
ultimately, I'm gonna ask you to continue it, so I
Okay.
can look at that and come back with some language for you.
okay.
But let me address all the issues if I could before I do
Do
that. The second issue, a variance trigger. The only variance that we really deal with respect to ag protection is a variance as to size of the ag protection. I could build that in as automatic trigger if they, so for example, if a ag protection area was granted for less than 40 acres, I could put that one as an automatic trigger if that's what you wanted me to do. So if you granted an ag protection area with a variance and it was 10 acres or 35 acres or whatever number, less than 40 acres, if you wanted that to be an automatic trigger where where the review is necessary in the 20th calendar year, I could put that in there if that's what you'd like.
Okay, see, so then let's go back to our last one. We did not carve out the roads. Let's say the guy, and I'm talking about the mink farm, he then has decided he's going to be a partner. He said he would give up the road, the dedicated road space. So let's say that time happens in the next 20 years, likely. He's then under 40, he automatically has to reapply. That's what you're asking us to put in there.
No, I'm not asking you to do
Oh,
anything.
you're asking us if we want that language
I'm
put in
asking you,
there.
if it's less than 40 acres and you prove a variance, do you want that as a trigger? See, remember, the way I drafted this thing was to give you max discretion initially, and then you kind of walked away back from that and said, no, we want a couple of triggers. For example, the 5 written complaints. If that's an automatic trigger now, so you no longer have discretion, if you receive those 5 written complaints, it's a full review.
Right.
Likewise, if you decide that you would like to have someone who's been granted a variance 20 years ago and their ag protection's up for review, if you want that to be a trigger, then you would not have discretion. You would have to have a full review on that one. Notwithstanding that, though, again, if you don't put that in there, you still have discretion to review it anytime you
And
want.
I think that's the
mean,
whole
on
point.
20th
I think
year- on the 20th year.
when we asked the legislature to help us in this issue, it was to give us discretion because we
Right.
have so many and the cost and time to the county.
Right, we have twice as many as the
I
other
would lean
counties,
toward
so.
the discretion, knowing that, so to Chris's point about, you know, what if they're out of compliance? Well, if there's a compliance issue, for example, there would be more than 5 written complaints.
You could, even if there's one, again, you'd have the
We-
discretion.
that's right, we would.
To be able to review those, though.
My inclination on that would not be to build that in, because I think we have the discretion here if something comes up. And I think, from my perspective, it's when a particular agricultural farm is not in good practice. You know, that's gonna trigger the complaints earlier, and I don't know that land size necessarily dictates good practice. So for me, from my perspective, for me, I'm more interested in the compliance to good practice and the protection from complaints, even though you're in good practice, that ag protection gives you. And so I would be reluctant to build that as an automatic trigger in there, because we have the discretion. And if there's a citizen that's saying, look, these guys aren't doing their job, they can always come to the commission, and then we can look at it.
And the other issue raised was variances related to, let's say, setback and those kinds of things. Those aren't related at all to ag protection. I mean, those are separate processes. They go to the Board of Adjustment. Those are land use decisions, which are different than what this ag protection is. I mean, and so those would, I hate to say it, would not be relevant to your ag protection determination because they're a land use decision. But the only variance, again, you deal with is that size.
Is that size. And to me, if you've cleared the size hurdle initially, the question moving forward becomes, are you maintaining good practices?
Yeah, and that's the
then
third
it's
issue.
gonna
that you
come in
raised.
under complaints if you're not.
These are reviewed by statute on the 20th calendar year. If they're not in compliance, there are some mechanisms to deal with non-compliance during those 20 years. But again, you have to establish, you know, best, you know, farming practices and things like that. It's a difficult standard to overcome. These protections are built for the benefit of ag users, right? For the farmer, for the rancher, for the mink farmer. I mean, they are built to protect those uses. And so that's what they're there for. And if they're approved, then that additional protection is put in place for them.
So, just, this is for ag protection and industrial use as well. They're both tied together.
This statute itself, this ordinance itself is not. This is, as you see, it's a review of ag protection areas.
But overall, the APA also has an industrial component to it as
Does,
well.
I don't believe we have one currently.
We don't. We
Yes.
don't have any that have applied for anything like that.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, the reason why we fought for this was to give us options, to give us discretion, and also to cut down on some of the costs, the unnecessary costs that we were seeing our staff go through when it came to agricultural protection.
Yeah, because some of these are so large. I mean, there's 10,000 acres in some of these, the LDS one, that's coming up next year. And I don't think there's been a complaint about that one, is my understanding. But again, it's your ordinance. We can do what you like. My suggestion is, if you want to continue this a week, I'll look at that 120 days and come back with some language. And
Seems like that's the one that we'd like you to look at to
Yeah.
see if we can get some language on
Yeah, I
it.
And I
definitely,
just don't see why it can't say at least 120 days before the end of the ag protection
Yeah, just,
area's calendar year.
20th
Or
calendar year, something
whatever.
like that. Yeah, we
But referencing,
I'm assuming that's probably what'll happen. I just want to look at the statute to make sure I'm on solid ground when I do that.
yeah, and that's fine. I just
your
like that
benefit.
clean. I think that's a valid point that Chris has brought up. It's confusing, and I'd like to make
Makes
sure
sense.
we clean that up.
Any other changes you'd like me to include if I bring it back next week?
number 2 is good for me, because I like the discretion it gives the commission for the other, which I think all the other concerns can still be enacted
Yeah,
by
I
the
mean,
commission.
You could certainly make that's an initial review. You could decide you want to have a full review. Even if you don't have any complaints at all and they're a great one and they do a great job, you can still say, sorry, you want to review the whole thing. You could do that.
okay, thank you.
And I'll move that we continue item 17 on the consent agenda for 1 week.
Second?
I've got a motion and a second to continue item number 17. All in favor?
Aye.
That passes 3-0. Okay, number 4.
This is a real quick question for you, Rebecca, or HR, either one. The real question is when we go from half-time to three-quarter time, was this already a benefited employee? That's why I didn't see a benefit adjustment and no question from the auditor on budgetary funds. That was my only question, so, okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
If we're on it, Rebecca, would you mind just explaining what's necessitated the change and what they're gonna go ahead and be doing for us?
Yes, so, Rebecca Montel, Children's Justice Center. You know, we really have needed for a long time a multidisciplinary team orientation person. We've kind of left it to individual police jurisdictions to orient new detectives coming on, and I think that's been a struggle. So this will orient them to the statutes related to the Children's Justice Center as well as task force policies, and also just kind of helping support the team overall, as well as our own employees at the center.
Thank you.
Okay,
I will move then that we authorize the changes stated in regular agenda item 4.
Second?
we had a motion and a second to authorize the changes stated in number 4 on our regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. We table number 5 for further discussion. Number 8.
I just have a question on this. And Dave, could you basically explain the current agreements that are in place in relationship to the dispersing of these funds and how they're handled?
Yes, there's currently in place an interlocal agreement with UTA that provides for the direct transfer of these sales tax funds from the state to UTA. That was, I don't have a copy of the agreement with me, I think it was back in 2011. So that has been what's happened since that point in time at least. And this letter doesn't change that direction, but it provides a notice to the state treasurer and the state tax commission that the county is reviewing the scheduling of those transfers and may in the future make a request to the tax commission and the state treasurer that those payments be scheduled in accordance with how the county elects to make those. Those currently, to my understanding, are being made on a monthly basis.
Okay, for a historical perspective, why has the money not come to the county and then the county just dealt directly with the dispersing of those funds?
The statutory provision allows for it to be a direct payment with the consent of the county. And so that's what's been done, I assume, to facilitate the prompt receipt of those funds by the UTA.
So it just makes it faster?
Pardon me?
So it just makes, the theory is it just makes it faster or less paperwork or? It just
I would
seems
assume
weird
so.
that we don't handle our own money in who we pay,
Well, it's the only one we don't, actually.
so.
Yeah. We entered an interlocal agreement,
We did.
and in reading down through that interlocal agreement, it has that direct transfer written into it. It also has in there that there is discretion on our part as to how that direct transfer can happen.
I don't know that it contains any language identifying any discretion on our part, but the only thing it does say
It
is
says
that it
at the
would be a
direction,
direct
at the
payment.
direction of the county
Well,
commission.
the irony on this one that drives me crazy is the fact that UTA gets their money basically immediately. And the state tax commission still, much to our chagrin, waits and we don't get our portion of that for 90 days later because Deneen, every time we ask her, she's always 2 months behind because of receipt of money, literally. So that's
Yeah.
what's ironic to this. So why we can't put everybody on the same schedule that we're on?
And I don't know, I was told that it's a monthly distribution, and I thought the implication was it was monthly to everyone, but obviously they have to receive
Well, it
those
is monthly
funds.
after 3 months.
Well, they have to get the funds, obviously.
Mr. Chairman, let me just clarify on that. The entities that assess the sales tax and then turn around and report that to the tax commission always do that 1 month behind. So that means that they generate the sales tax in December, and then they have to report to the tax commission by the end of January. Then the tax commission then goes ahead and does their processing and distributes us, those proceeds to us. So there's a 2-month lag from actual, but we're always receiving funds every single month. It's just a 2-month lag from when the funds we received, when they were actually generated at the point of sale.
Andrew, did you have a comment?
Just relating to the agreement on the transfer.
State your name for the
Andrew,
record,
sorry.
even though we know you.
Andrew Jackson with Mountain Land Association of Governments. I'm not sure on that 2011 agreement, that may have also included the 5912-2216 funds, the second quarter, because when that first came out, there was a certain percentage that went to UTA and a certain percentage that went to the county. I think we had 8%.
There was actually a different interlocal
8%.
for that one.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
This one's separate.
okay,
We looked at that language. It's the,
okay.
That one was tied to a bonding.
Because
or
we had to do it,
something.
because it's part of the thing where the tax commission cannot transfer it just on word. They have to have an interlocal agreement to make
Right.
that transfer. Okay, thank you.
okay, any other questions?
So, and that clarification, this is just that we would like to type of letter, right? It's not a binding,
Yeah, we're not changing their current practice, but we're giving them notice that we may be doing so in the future. So it would require a subsequent action to actually specify what schedule we would like them to
At this
follow.
point, we want a conversation, is what the letter's really saying.
okay.
Okay,
Any other questions?
any other comments?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll move then that we authorize Commission Chair to execute a letter stated in regular agenda item 8.
Second,
I've got a motion and a second to authorize and execute the letter as stated in number 8. All in favor?
aye?
Aye. That passes 3-0. That's it, I think.
Okay.
Now is to go to the closed meetings. We'll,
I move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property, water rights, or water shares for today's date at this location following completion of regular agenda and work session agenda items.
Second,
I've got a motion and a second to approve a set of date, time, and location as stated in number 10 on a regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
aye?
Aye. That passes 3-0.
Move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss the sale of real property, water rights, or water shares previously publicly noticed for sale for today's date at this location following completion of regular agenda and work session agenda items.
Second,
Got a motion and a second to approve a set date, time, and location as stated in number 11 on the regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
aye?
Aye. That passes 3-0.
I move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual or individuals for today's date at this location following completion of regular agenda and work session agenda item.
Second,
Motion and a second to approve a set date, time, and location as stated in number 12. All in favor, say aye.
aye?
That passes 3-0.
I move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation for today's date at this location following completion of regular agenda and work session agenda item.
Second,
Got a motion and a second to approve a set of date, time, and location as stated in number 13 on our regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0. Okay, we have we have one work session item, the presentation by our fire team. If you'd like to come forward, we'll listen to that presentation. Just a reminder to state your name.
That's okay, it was a little confusing last time anyway. Thank you.
Jamie Nelson with Utah County Fire.
Nathan Trujillo, Utah County Fire.
So this was in regards to your guys' request after the last meeting to kind of go back over what we had planned for the wildland fire prevention regarding the legislation that was passed in 2016. I just kind of gave you some of the refresh information that came. I'm not sure Commissioner Ivy was part of that original meeting.
I
So
wasn't.
the first sheet is just kind of the brochure that the state passes out for their information purpose. And the second sheet kind of drives the work progress. It's the blue one. Has the 3 categories that all of the participation funds have to match. There's the prevention category, the preparedness category, which can only be up to the 25% of your match, and as well as the wildland fire mitigation section. that can be a minimum of 50%, so you can actually meet more than that. There are a couple questions and clarifications that we wanted to make regarding the program from last time. If you go to the first stapled section, there's kind of 2 sheets with a pie chart. And Utah County signed the cooperative agreement to do the participation match in 2016 with Utah Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands to implement prevention, preparedness, and mitigation actions to reduce the wildfire risk according to their annual participation commitment statement. For this year, the state has actually changed the participation match a couple of times. So the number that we have now that is steady for 2017 will be the 377,587 to meet our participation match.
That's a little lower than what they originally thought.
They originally told us 424, and then they told us like 418. And this is the final number that we've had.
I'll have to back off my state comments for a minute.
So, well, so these are the numbers. In addition to that, it's important to remember that this is a discounted rate that the state puts forward, and that it increases 10% every year until we meet our full participation match, which is based on the 10-year average, which is close to 4.5 to 500,000 actually. So if you look, that's kind of the increase that you'll see.
Although in like 3 years, it lowers again because we lose
Because
an
we're-
expensive fire.
Exactly. Because our whole goal is to reduce the wildfire risk with this program. And the more work we do and the more stuff we can do on the ground, we can actually reduce and hopefully hold this cost. And it should stay there, if not reduce, if we can possibly drive that. A couple of the facts and stuff we wanted to address to kind of clear things up from last time is down at the base. The program process, no payments can be made to the state. They do not accept any funds. Everything is to be done through funded participation match and project work. The second is work-related costs count 100%. So it is a dollar for dollar match. Every hour that we put in, whether it's personnel or equipment purchases, every dollar will count as long as we meet the requirements through here. And we stay out of the red zone, which is the restricted match. You were kind enough and approved the person, a new full-time captain position. So in the back, you'll see kind of a breakdown of, we had the original plan, which was for the 4 personnel, and I did include like the revised numbers of that if you wanted to see that in the back. But an additional plan, we created a new one regarding if we have 1 person. So with the 1 person, if a full-time captain position at 90,000, to meet our 377,000, we were tasked last time by you guys to complete fuels project work, and we explained to you that we've had our hand crews up in Mapledale, and I have pictures. I wasn't sure it was going to be an open one, so we can show them later if you want. But we've completed roughly $60,000 work already. We created the prevention account, so that account has just kind of been accruing a charge to get that work and labor done. 60,000 is an estimate. We can't currently pull the exact numbers. The payroll thing isn't quite accurate right now. We're looking at, in order to meet our match, we would like to go for a hand-fed chipper, which would run the $104,714. That includes the trailer to get it moving. Without the chipper, we can't get any of this fuels reduction work done. So we've got everybody on the mountain pulling the trees, cutting, limbing up, reducing the fire.
But that equipment goes to our mitigation expense.
Exactly. Every dollar of that equipment counts.
Cool.
So that would be the purchase of that and any equipment related to this program, we wouldn't request unless it absolutely is approved by the state and meets our match.
Hey, so the only question I would have on that is, how fast can we get it? Because we're now starting to get in those days where we're running. We now can start seeing the end of when we can start doing some of this good work.
Yes, so if the funding's provided and the accounts are set up and we have the funding there, the 377,000 to funded, so we can actually get the work done, we can purchase the chipper. Nate has already done the groundwork on that, has it spec'd out, the companies are ready to go. And for 2017, there is a grace period that you can carry
Right.
some over, and the
Right.
state's a little flexible as far as getting that work done. As well as the other portion, that still leaves $122,000 left of work to do. If we implement the chipper with our hand crews or different recess or anything, it's a rough estimate of 23 days of direct fuels mitigation work.
So are you saying that you don't have the funds for the chipper?
We
Or
don't.
you do?
Currently, the participation fund is, from what I understand, is strictly non-existent
Yeah,
Or
we,
unrestricted.
well, yeah, we only funded the position in the budget, that I remember, because we wanted to see how much work you could do.
Absolutely.
And that 60,000 tells us, and that's a good number. So in other words, if I read this then correctly, if the commission were to fund the 714, excuse me, for the chipper, our hand crews then for 23 straight days could go and get enough cost that we would meet 100% of our compliance this year. Is that how I'm reading that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We've been trying to use the existing county chipper, which only has about an 8-inch diameter. It doesn't work. Our guys can't even get any work done.
How
It
old
shuts
is
them
that?
down. How old is the chipper?
Yeah.
I've worked here 16 years and it's way older than that.
Well, then we finally have something
It's,
that we're using a long time.
it's very insufficient to do the diameter and get the work done. So we actually lose productivity and lose work in the field because it shuts them down. and
So
it
what would
can't
be the
take pictures.
diameter of this new one?
Be a 15-inch chipper, and it'll be tracked, so we can go off-road and get up into the backcountry where we need it.
And it's open, I mean, it's a piece of county property. The funds completely count towards the participation match, but then the county also has it to use for other items.
So Nathan, you've done some of the legwork. Have you worked with Robert Baxter on, and shown him any of these bids and talked to him since he's our purchasing manager? Or you just been basically getting quotes?
I've just been getting bids and quotes
Okay.
on it, so when the time comes and get the okay, we can just go ahead and get with him and get it purchased.
So again, going back to this, where does that $104,000 come from?
Us.
So,
Mr. Chairman, if I can maybe jump in here a little bit, this money has been set aside in the county budget to pay the deductible for the insurance for the past number of years, if I'm right, Mr. Thompson. So the money has been in the county budget. It hasn't came through wildland fire. The state has now changed the program to where we have to do the mitigation work instead of paying an insurance deductible
Right, we
on
would
it.
just have
So
to transfer
you
it from there
have
to
the
So you're saying
money,
the money's there?
it's in the county's budget somewhere from prior years. It's not in our budget.
That's if we
So
budgeted for the
it
insurance
needs to
payment.
be moved from the county budget that used to pay the state deductible into the budget to purchase the equipment. Mr. Chairman, I'd have to clarify on that, but there's been Title III funds that we've had for some time, and we had a meeting almost 2 years ago with Lieutenant Cortez, and we even discussed, we potentially could purchase the wood chipper using these Title III funds, and then nothing ever came of that. And so we have a funding source that we actually are gonna have to send back to the federal government that is well over $100,000 that this chipper may qualify under. And
So
because
that's
of the restricted
That's the
nature.
SRS funds you're talking about?
That's the SRS Title III section. And so I would strongly encourage that we look at utilizing these funds because we're almost to a point where we're gonna have to turn them back
Well, there's
because
no
they haven't
reason-
been spent. So
Right.
so
that's where I would highly recommend we look at the legality and if that qualifies and use those funds first.
and that would actually be a better out if they have that. There's a million different ways to implement this project working funds. If that,
Well, if these funds are set to expire, unlike the delay in HR to get your person, let's get with Mr. Thompson's office right away, figure out how to do that. Also get those quotes to Mr. Baxter and let's move because. you know,
Secure the funds first, and
Yes.
then we'll move.
That's why I
on.
say, work with the auditor, then work with the purchasing manager, give him the quotes, and then let's get that part back to the commission. Also, obviously, working with the sheriff, since he oversees your department.
It's also about a 90-day buildup for the machine.
Sure. That's why I say it's gotta be,
Yeah.
I know those things can't be, it's not like going down to, you know, your local dealership or, so.
and it would definitely be great to use the funds from there. What that would do is if we can secure the funds from the commission to fund the prevention program, which is, we've already signed the contract to do the work. Now we actually need to be able to be given
Right,
the
but the
tools
reason
to
we
do the
didn't fund and give you guys $400,000 when they asked was, one, because we wanted to see for the year, we knew the risk we were taking.
Mhm.
We funded the one position and we thought, okay, we wanna see how much work you can do to see where we're at.
Absolutely.
And so, the only part we're behind is because of the person being delayed in being hired. We haven't recouped everything we could have up to this point.
No, and there's, besides the chipper, there's different equipment we can put towards it. There's softwares that could go towards creating the CWPPs to give us a better awareness of these homes and the risk that they run in the hazard areas. There's a lot of different ways, and that, it's gonna be a continual process. This was just the idea for 2017, to get it going, to get it started. Every year, there's gonna be,
Sure, but it sounds like you've found some money, found a way. Let's get going.
And if I understand, and we'd have to look at it closely with the civil division, but anything related with education, mitigation, things like that, could all tap into this Title
Oh,
III
absolutely.
funds, so
and
we
that's,
definitely
Yeah,
should
so
be,
let's use it all.
The Forest
that's where
Service
we're gonna-
uses it all the time.
yeah.
and that's where we work to complete the projects and capture, this individual will capture that, and the more work we can get done and capture as far as cost. We would still need the personnel to actually do the groundwork and the hours, that would be the 122,000. That's just a rough estimate of what it takes or how many
Well,
days.
okay,
once
so
they're done.
that was, let me rephrase my question then, because
Okay.
what I asked you was, if we buy you the wood chipper, our current hand crews could go and work for 23 days and get that, and you guys said yes.
Yes, so our hand crews, and I had it on our PowerPoint because I thought this was a little different, I thought it was an after-work session, sorry, is our hand crews, currently to kind of refresh on how the county fire program works, we have one fire warden, we have 4 full-time captains, all the rest of our 77 seasonal employees are an on-call at will. We don't have a staffing for project work. They are strictly suppression. They spent 353 days on wildland fires on the resource order portion last year. We don't actually have a staffing for, or a budget line for prevention and
Sure we do,
project
because
work.
it's a revenue generating program, and therefore we can take some of that revenue to offset some of this cost and pay them to come and do 23 days of mitigation, right? Now, I know that's not what you wanna hear, because what we want to do is take the revenue that we make from them, buy new fire trucks, fire engines and stuff like that. But if for the first year, while we see and make sure the program works, we need to take some of that revenue to fund that, I don't see the problem, right? Because again, if equipment breaks down, the commission has always gone through and said, yes, we know we have to do this. We have certain obligations we have to meet. But I don't know why we couldn't do that potentially, because there was some revenue created from it last year, obviously, you know. We could offset it in that time, and by the time it comes to budget season, which is only 3 months away, we'll have a very good idea of where we're at and what we need to do, whether it's adding a half-time person, adding a full-time person, whatever that is, right? So that, to me, that's how I kind of like to see us proceed a little, right now.
Yeah, and
Sure, Tracy. Quickly, the issue currently, though, is that the funding that comes in as we gain the revenue, there needs to be a specific line item now, though, so when they do this work, they can pay them in the 2 weeks when the paycheck comes due. That we don't have in a current line item somewhere.
Okay.
I'm gonna go back to, our initial conversations a year ago, whenever it was. The thought, as I understood it, was that we didn't necessarily want Utah County to fund all this through in the way of dollar figures with, either personnel or with, we're looking for volunteers, we're looking for other areas that we can tap into, and this full-time position was tapped to find ways in which we can mitigate it without an actual dead cost to the county. I think that was more of the goal, was that to find those ways that we can actually tap into that without it being a dead cost, either through personnel or through chippers or through equipment, so that we can get to the end goal.
and we can capture a portion of that, and that's what the person's goal and the drive is to do. The original request for 4 was because it's a very large county and hard to
With a
capture
lot of
everything there is.
volunteers.
And we do. The cost and the value of the volunteers, it'll be a small fraction. We can't absorb all of that. And as for the resource program,
Well, I remember the state saying a number of $20 an hour
Mhm.
when we were all right here, that we get $20 an hour per person participating.
Mhm.
That's,
I think
that's
with
only
the
a couple of
Woodland
days
Hills-
with a few volunteers. I mean, even if it's the county, we already give all of our employees, we go and do a service day already with United Day of Caring.
Mhm.
Heaven forbid, we could have one quick one for fire mitigation and knock quite a lot out, because 300 employees at 2 hours for $20 an hour gets you quickly up there.
I think we have I think the 60,000 is about 25 days worth of work that our hand crew has done. And so that's the goal of the person, is to capture all
Yeah,
of that.
but that's 4 or 5 people on your hand crews, right?
No, that's 21.
21 people.
That's 21 people
But my
working
point
10
is
hours a
still,
day.
if we get county employees, or we get groups together that are looking for service opportunities. That's kind of what we were hoping. So when you guys had asked us for 4 people, right? And you were gonna break them up by quadrants, in essence, for the county. That's still what we thought they were going to do. One, okay, so this person has Lehigh Alpine area, that whole northern quadrant there. They were still gonna coordinate and find scout groups, Eagle Scout projects, Girl Scout projects, church service projects,
Yeah.
to help facilitate and keep and track that. That's what we thought this
That's-
full-time
and-
position was doing.
And we can do that, and the volunteer hours, there is a limit to how much volunteer work and impact that they actually get. They do their private property, and you get some fuels and fire reduction hazard there, but the big projects that we get, and I wish I had the pictures up for you, are these fire break lines that are around these communities. The only people capable and certified to safely and efficiently put the specifications in and get that labor done are fire crews. We go in, we put a 60-foot swath with ladder fuels put in. It takes them a month and a half of saw work every day. We can't get that out of volunteers. And that's gonna give you your biggest fire reduction risk into these urban
But
interface
60
areas.
days, all of a sudden, that's double the time, and we've banked some for next year.
I think part of the ongoing discussion is the work that needs to be done, the value of that, and the requirement to get those safety, things put into position as far as fire breaks and fuel load reductions. The equation of that for the cost and the value of what we can get out of that, there's gonna be a differentiation between how much work needs to be done. It's in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars if you were to do it all. But there is some offset that we can use for the volunteers, but up to only a point where, like I said, based on saw safety and use and things, to put a bunch of civilians up there with a bunch of chainsaws, and we're gonna end up with a bunch of search and rescues, or at least medical issues. So the value of what needs to be done is far exceeds this $400,000 of what the risk will be mitigated by paying that, coordinating also those volunteers. But you can't offset 2/3 of that with just volunteer hours.
And we wanted to maximize whatever that number was.
And
The
that's the
problem is on this plan,
Right.
that still is not even accounted for. And I
That-
think
that-
that's what Commissioner Lee's bringing up is, we asked for that, we were clear. So when,
Right.
when I met with the sheriff's department last June and we learned of this, you guys are telling me, okay, we're gonna have to do this. I'm like, I'm not there, and I'm probably the slowest one to get here on funding this, because I think there's plenty of opportunity to earn a lower plus. Quite honestly, I think the state on this program, we're exceeding our costs, because I know they're using the 10-year average, but our average of late is not even close to what we're spending here. That's why,
Hopefully it'll continue to go down
Sure.
depending on the fire year. But I guess the issue is that when we look at the communities and say, okay, you've got these areas that are at risk, we identified those. To put them into the position of improved safety and mitigation, that work is far exceeding just what we're trying to do here. This is the minimal effort to put together some acceptable safety risk reduction. That's what I'm saying. So you're right. To be able to offset half of that would be great with volunteers. At this point in time, I don't think it can be done. It can be brought in with additional monies in the future as we get this program running, but the immediate need is to get out there and get some of this reduction done. And at this point in time, the quickest way to do that is to do this
heck,
through
I'd
this
settle
program.
for all those crews taking their kids up there and standing and watching and counting and taking $20 per hour.
Well, and currently, like I said, I think revenue will be up this year. There's no doubt about that. We have, 21 people right now that were called up Saturday, is that right?
Yeah.
We sent 21 people down to those fires in southern Utah, so they are on the clock. So those revenues are being generated, and I don't see any change or reduction in that through this whole fire year. It's gonna be a bad one.
I think the goal all along, it always comes down to how much exposure we have on risk
Right.
when it comes to these catastrophic fires that are out there. And the state has given us an opportunity through doing this to they're gonna take on more of that risk, but they want us to do some mitigation in the way of
Right.
going up there and trying to say, hey, let's get this down so there's not as much fuel's up there. And so the balancing act, as I see it, is, because we were thinking, well, let's just go ahead and pay it. If we're just gonna pay it, let's just pay it and get the coverage that we need. But the state then doesn't kick in with the over-the-top end of it in the way of the exposure. So for us, it's the money issue is just where do we actually wind up in the end? We don't really want to wind up in the end where we're paying the same amount for the coverage that we would have got normally. So that's the balancing act that I see with it.
Right.
I wanna make
I
sure that we're
don't-
trying to do it through volunteers, and that's the whole goal here, is to get people up there to offset some of that dead cost.
Right, and I think though the other thing you have to look at long-term is that as we mitigate this, then our costs don't go up because we have additional bad years that come into the matrix for considering our annual cost.
Right.
So we're trying to reduce the fuel so that this year and in next year and the year after that, we don't continue to have higher costs because we have a bad fire year for the next 3 years because we didn't ever get the fuel reduced.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
With the availability of we can purchase the chipper and that equipment through the Title III funds, that would free up that 100,000 that we can hopefully find through maybe volunteer hours or community projects or work within the unincorporated areas is the key, is that has to be work that's actually done in the private unincorporated areas of the county. So if we can work.
The
with-
work has to be done, but it doesn't have to be done by citizens that only live in that area, because I asked that specific question to the state, and they said no, as long as it's coordinated by Utah County Fire for the mitigation in Utah County fire lands that we're over in charge with, we can count that.
Right, we will
We
capture.
can't count it if Woodland Hills has a day and we show up, our hours count for Woodland Hills.
We are going to capture every dollar possible.
Sure.
I mean, that's our goal, is to soften, because what that does is allow the budget to move in different things elsewhere. Our goal is not to
How are we
raise the cost.
hiring the person? Is the job advertised?
I spoke with them this morning. We got the final description last week from them, and she was working on getting the recruitment date set this morning.
Let's get that ASAP.
It's been in the
Perfect.
works.
Say just an update on that. Merritt Fulmer from HR. Kevin requested to look at the job description one more time before we finalized it. I've sent that to him. I have not heard back from him. We are ready to post. The position's been added to the staffing plan. We're just waiting to get his final approval on the job description before we
So
move forward.
just then get back to Kevin, have him send it today.
So we sent that back 2 weeks ago.
No,
Judy
and
already-
since then, he
Yeah.
has asked me.
I talked to Judy on email this morning. She's done and working on the recruitment date.
I haven't seen the job description back from him since last week when he.
Okay, well, we'll
requested
get
it.
that coordinated.
But we'll get that figured out today. I will, is he working? Am I able to?
It's
Okay.
been done.
Okay,
The other piece that I forgot that Richard just reminded me is when you go through for this big equipment, aside from our purchasing manager, also work with Dan at Public Works.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So,
okay, anything else?
no, do you guys have any questions for us as far as how we can
Get working.
go from there? Do you,
Keep
do I
working.
need to ask him about running it on that prevention red one? So, my question is, you want us to get working, and we've been working, and there's like $60,000. We created the prevention pay codes with Deneen and Daleen, and have been running the cost accountings for that. Since there is not a funded line, or there's not a budget
Work with
backing
Deneen
that.
and Brian on that as far as how they'd like to account for that.
Okay, and so I guess I'm just making
It's
sure
it's
that
definitely
we're,
not gonna be us three that set up that.
so you want us to continue, is that, I just wanna be clear, cause I don't
Make sure
wanna.
there's gonna be money
Yeah,
there
is
for
there
it.
money in there, or are you having us just running a tab
Oh, you're saying the
on
funded
these
line?
labors? So the prevention work that we've done and when we get the chipper to do the work, where is the money coming from? So we can make sure that we're in
this-
line, everybody's on.
So
the
technically,
same
this
page.
is a work session, that's why we've given you guidance, there's no decision.
Okay,
I'd work with the sheriff on that too, and then, of course,
And we can have
Yeah.
more broad discussions, but
great,
on the funding of all those things, work with those people and we can have that discussion.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
okay. That ends our work session. Is there any public comment? General public comment? Seeing none, we'll move into our work session, our closed meeting sessions. Thank you.
Not fun work session portion.
Yeah. Yeah, the stress part.